So if you're here for the first time, it's your divine appointment. We're in the middle of a book series, but you'll miss nothing because you can go back if you'd like and check out the past lessons. But we're studying the book Presence and Potential by Martha Creek. And she'll be here later on in this month, but she is an incredible woman, an author, and a spiritual teacher. And so I invite you to check out her work and connect with it because she is a woman of depth and also of bold, fearless authenticity. Yeah? Anyone that knows her? Bold and fearless authenticity, which I feel like gives us all permission, permission to be. And we need that in this day and age. We need that even in spiritual community, right? How many people think there's a way you're supposed to show up in spiritual community, right? And there's a way you're not supposed to. Martha's about lifting off all of those shoulds and getting to who we are, getting to the core of who we are. And she makes a promise, and that promise is if we do this work, we will have a greater connection with others and a greater peace within ourselves. And she urges us to get out of the book and out of theory and make this a spiritual practice, to really dive into it. So this could be a good book and your life couldn't change, right? This could be a good book and it's like, well, my life's the same when I started reading this book as when I finished reading this book. Or is this being funny? Is it going, it's okay. I didn't know if it's me or something else. I feel like I hear it. Oh, it's going to bug me. So that's the purpose of this book, is to get out of the theory and get into the practice, right? Has anyone ever had a counseling appointment where, you have all this stuff, all these problems, right? And it's like, oh, you can feel them. You're either angry or you're sad. You can cry and, all these things about issues going on. And then you go into the counselor's office and it's like, what's going on? And you're like, well, theoretically, these are the things going on. But there's like no emotion. You're not into it, right? I have one spiritual guide that I work with, and he does somatic work, and he teaches meditation and all of that. And so I'm kind of a hard cookie to crack sometimes, and I can go in there and I've got all the, like, here's what's going on. Here's my family system stuff. Here's my childhood stuff. Here's everything. Here's what I'm going through. But there can be like no emotion, right? And he can just like ask a couple of words, and he's like, Choo. And I'm like, I am angry. Or, I'm crying and the feelings are up. We can only work things when they're up, right? It's a safe thing to work things in our minds, to work things when they're not happening. It's a safe thing to read books. Someone could be in unity for 50 years and have read every book, but not work the work, not live the teachings, right? It takes something different. It takes a practice, and it takes like a radical inventory of yourself and a willingness for the higher good of yourself, for your purpose here, and for spirit to work it, to really look at it. So, in the beginning, we did week 1 and week 2, and when we talked about creating clarity in our lives is about defining ourselves while staying connected to others. Can I define who I am? And that may be different from you, but I can still stay connected to you. Can I regulate my own anxiety? Can I take responsibility for that? And can I have practices where I, instead of passing on my anxiety, I share my mindfulness and my calm? Like I will share my regulated system with you. Can we distinguish between facts and feelings? And the nutshell of that one is don't borrow trouble. How often we're in the feelings of things, but we forget that the facts are much simpler. And they're not so loaded. They're not so loaded with our childhood programming or our fears or our need to control or our woundedness. It just is what it is. So don't borrow trouble. The next week we talked about non-resistance, the principles of non-resistance, how to profess our values. And to do that, because has anyone lived life without just trying to be quiet and not profess what you say, right? I was having a little band rehearsal with some friends. We're doing a special gig kind of thing in a town that's like 45 minutes away. I don't even know where it is, but it's for first responders. So we're volunteering for that to do music for them. And one of the friends. There was a silly song that someone saw on someone else's iPad, and it was a song that could trigger people for sure. But we're on the back deck, and the song began to go through the microphone, on the back deck. And I can see like one of the guys is like, I don't know if we should be singing that song here. And another one, we were laughing, and it's like, okay, let's be done with that song. But how many times have you tried to silence yourself because you think, what are going to be the consequences? What will be the consequences of people knowing? Do you know this is bad? Do you know that I don't tell people I'm a minister right away? Even when they're like a Christian? Because sometimes it is a complete and instant disconnect. What I don't get anymore is I don't get their authenticity. The second that's out there, it's like, oh, we better behave in whatever my idea of what a minister is, I better behave like that now. And then I get people's boring sides. And I'm like, no, you don't understand me. I almost didn't go into ministry because I was like, there's never going to be a church that I'll fit into, right? So I kind of keep it hidden for a while, and then I pop it out. Or else someone else pops it out in front of me, and I'm like, oh, yeah, and that. But can we profess our own values, be who we are, without attacking or judging others? Can we let go of, she says, expecting others to think, feel, and act like we do? Now, that sounds funny when you say it like that, right? Like, of course, we should expect others to think, act, and be like you are? Come on. But how often do we upset ourselves because people are not like us, right? I mean, the second I know someone likes music, I'm like, you are my friend. Right? The second someone thinks like me, acts like me, responds like me, I'm like, I can be myself. I can be comfortable. I'm safe. Martha invites us into standing in that with our own integrity no matter what, and gives us the tools to have compassion and presence to do that in a mindful way. And then she says, accept differences between people. Now, that again sounds just funny. Like, well, what are we going to do? Not accept them? Well, so yep, exactly. We will not accept them. And what does that do? Does that change people? No, it just makes us miserable, right? So what are we doing here with this work? When we take the deep dive in, we're looking at who we are, we're looking at how we tick, we're understanding ourselves, and we're standing for ourselves. We are seeing and letting go of expectations, judgments. Now, I say seeing and letting go, because sometimes we just want to let go of them. But we can't let go of them if we don't see them, right? And it takes a practice. It takes mindfulness to see them. This work is nothing if we don't do the deep work, right? So we have kind of assignments. One of the weeks, and I don't know if anyone else did it, but one of the weeks we talked about going out without your phone. Raise your hand if you did it. Nobody did it. I accidentally did it. That's how Spirit works in my life. If I give an assignment and I'm like, we should do this, and then I completely forget about it, and then I'm like, oh, we don't have the phone. That's okay. Let's just go. Keep going. And then I was like, that was an assignment. Good, I did it. But to notice what comes up, to notice how we feel when we do that. So this week, the assignment is this. Start taking an inventory of your mind and your thoughts related to these topics that we're discussing today, and move into the observer state. Move into the observer state, and then either journal some things or connect with a friend, connect with someone else. If you're in one of our many small groups, or you go to one of the deep dives after the service, you can connect there. But connect with someone or journal about your observations. And I'm talking, you've got to be safe with someone, because we need to do a radical inventory. This isn't just like only what I want people to see or to know about me. This is being hardcore with ourselves. This is like old school, I grew up Catholic, confessional booth, right? Like, what is it if we're not taking it to the limit? Now I've got, put me on a highway and show me a sign. Take it to the limit one more time. So that's what we're going to do this week, right? Yeah. Take it to the limit. In yoga, we call it working your edge. Like, get on your mat and work your edge. Not because you need to, not because someone's telling you to, but because it's your maximum. Can you bring it? Can you take it to the limit? So the next piece of our assignment this week is a 10 to 20 minute meditation every day. If you need to start with 2, do it. If you need to do it once a week, do it. Unity is all about giving permission to do your style, but 10 to 20 minutes a day. Because here's what it does. It slows down the mind. It allows us the space to actually do the greater work. We go so fast that we often don't see a lot of what's going on in our lives. Charles Fillmore, Unity's co-founder, says, you must first enter into the understanding that God, omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient, is the source, and that you can draw on this source without limit. This source is known and experienced and felt in the silence. And spaciousness is what gives us the grace to receive, right? It's always there, but it gives us the grace to receive those insights. So this week we're talking about inner dominion. If you're working with the book, it's chapters 7 through 10. But inner dominion. And so one of the first invitations that Martha gives us is to grow ourselves up. Grow yourself up. Can you say that to yourself? Grow yourself up. Don't say it to anyone else. It's not going to go over well. Just say it to yourself. So when you're doing something, say, grow yourself up, Erin. Don't say Erin, though. That'll be a lot of work on me, and I'll have a lot of extra work to do. She asks us this question, how am I going to respond to, and you fill in the blank, XYZ, regardless of what they are doing or saying? How am I going to respond to things regardless of what people are doing or saying? Does anyone else here wish they had the presence to be able to respond exactly how they'd like to all the time? Right? What about being consistent? Like, no matter how people are showing up, if people are showing up considerate, inconsiderate, if people are showing up conscious, not conscious, mindful, not mindfully, if your reactions are yours because you own them, because they're about who you are, they're about your integrity, they're about your spiritual work and your spiritual practice, and they reflect your light, they reflect your God consciousness, they reflect your human condition. Now, that's a lot of pressure, isn't it? I'm already starting to feel a little exhausted just saying that. But when we can be aware of our stuff and when we can be aware of the work, right, we can take responsibility for it and we can grow ourselves up because so often, as Martha says, we run around like kids thinking everything else is everyone's fault. Does anyone have kids? And like they tell you that it's all your fault. Well, at least mine does right now. Like everything is like, yeah. And I try to give her the unity stuff, like only you can make yourself angry. It feels a little bit like abuse, child abuse, like you're in charge of your own happiness. He's like, actually you are, like you're my cage right now. Martha says, regardless of what another person is doing, the question is, how am I going to respond to this? Regardless of what they are doing, whatever they are saying, accusing, blaming me, of criticizing me for, none of it is mine. I cannot change someone else's aspect. What I can change is how I respond to the situation. She goes on to say, our job is to learn how not to blame anybody else for the feelings we are having. Who wants to sign up their family for that? Yeah, I got some bold people here going, uh-huh. Like if that's a class we could teach in school. How not to blame anybody else for the feelings we are having. Whoa, she says, that changes everything. Personal responsibility is counterintuitive. Since we've been 3, 4, even 5 years old, we have blamed whoever was in our field for our sadness, despair, upset, for our being afraid. We looked to them and made them responsible for the shape we're in. We expected our parents to protect us, to provide for us, to take responsibility for our feelings. Go back to that other one. We looked to them and made them responsible for the shape we were in. Can we take that one this week? How often do we look to someone or something else and make them responsible for the shape we're in? Can you think of a relationship or anything, work, anything that comes up that you could practice that one this week? Even if it's just that one. Do you know if we mastered just that one, like how many issues would evaporate, right? If you can't think of anyone to do it with, just use the world and the nation. and the news, right? Right? Just go ahead and turn it on for even 10 minutes. You'll be good. Open an app. To soothe us. We expected them to soothe us when we had upset feelings. And that 4-year-old in us, she says, is still running the show. She goes on to say, what are the consequences to you if you continue to blame someone else for your emotions? What are the consequences to you if you continue to blame someone else for your emotions? Now, for some of us, this may be a new concept. Like, what do you mean other people aren't responsible for my emotions? Like they did something wrong, inappropriate, something that I didn't want them to do. They weren't acting like I would have, right? So that could be a new concept. This doesn't mean not having people be accountable for how they show up. It doesn't mean excusing inexcusable behavior. It means getting into the driver's seat of our own lives. It means being able to decide how we're going to feel about something, how we're going to feel about how we show up. So what are the consequences to you? Think about your own life and just breathe into that question. What are the consequences to you if you continue to blame someone else for your emotions? I know for me, there was a point in my life where I realized, while I was like wailing, that I realized if I continue this, I'm going to make myself sick. Like I'm going to have some physical sickness if I keep crying in this way, because it wasn't just a cry. I always tell little G, I tell her, crying isn't to get what you want. It's to feel your feelings and take care of yourself. So it's like, it's not something that needs to be directed at me per se. But can we say that to ourselves? Like, have you ever felt that in yourself? I can feel the difference between my cries that are about someone won't show up or something won't change to be what I need. Like, can you feel the difference between just like, I'm crying to get rid of my emotions, I'm crying to be with my grief, I'm crying to process. There's a difference. And one has these like tentacles that are like, if I act out enough, you will change. If I will act out enough, you might see, or the world might see, or whatever it is. It's like there's this pain in it that needs something to change for it to go away. It's different than just processing grief or processing a feeling, right? Because that's just a feeling without all these other thoughts. That just is what it is. She says, this practice and taking responsibility for our anger, for anything, she says, puts us back in our own power. It also keeps us from scapegoating anyone or displacing the pain, discomfort, and anger through blaming, which is a knee-jerk reaction. She goes on to give us the words, I'm responsible for my own discomfort. I'm responsible for my own discomfort. Disempowerment, empowerment. If there's a point of choice, that point is the only place in the universe where we have any control. That point of choice is the only place where we have any control. So can we take responsibility? Can we grow ourselves up? Can we grow ourselves up? When I looked at that question, what are the consequences if I continue to blame someone? One of the consequences I've noticed in life is putting myself into toxic situations around toxicity, around toxic thinking, toxic behavior, whatever it is, or just something that just doesn't fit for me. So the consequence of exporting that blame is that I don't set boundaries that honor myself. That's the consequence, and that is a big consequence. Because as long as I'm waiting for someone else to change, I can be in the illusion that I can stay in what I'm in, and it's not my fault. It's not my problem. It doesn't have to change in here. Sometimes we're holding so tightly onto something. We're holding so tightly because we just don't want to put up a boundary, right? We don't want to leave that job, leave that marriage, change that relationship, get into counseling, whatever it is. Confess to someone else that something else is going on, whatever it is. Maybe it's break through a threshold to something new. It's like I can say, well, it's the world, and that's going to keep me small. But if I take full responsibility, then I am responsible for living an ordinary life or an extraordinary life. And it's on me. Because I have a choice point. She talks specifically about anger in this chapter. She talks about owning our anger. And then in all of these chapters, she has a little bit that I put a little note on here that says, I don't do that. I don't have that. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand if you don't think you have anger issues. But if you don't think you have anger issues, think about what might be getting in the way of them. Because anger is part of the human condition. We shame it, we blame it, we don't want to see it, we don't want to deal with it, we turn it off. But knowing how to be with our anger is a really important thing. And so many of us didn't get those tools when we were younger. And so what happens with the anger? It spits out. It spits out, it flies out, it drives out, right? But it comes out. One thing I didn't realize until doing some deep, deep work is that whenever, in the processing of something that should make someone angry, what happens in me is I start caretaking and having some guilt around feeling that it is okay to be angry. So I kind of annihilate the anger with a little bit of a unity practice, right? I kind of go like, oh, but I know they're a good person and they wouldn't mean to do that and that would be whatever. So it's like my work now is being with that, not letting myself shame or blame myself out of the anger. Like it's okay to be angry. You can still love someone and know that they're a perfect child of God and know that they're magnificent and a beautiful being in their own right at times. No, I mean all of that is all the time, but the behaviors sometimes. But can we do that? Is there anything that slides in the way of your anger? And then because it'll come out, right? It'll come out at other times. Mine comes out when I'm in a hurry or when I haven't been heard. Can you know that about yourself? Can you know your triggers and know them so well you can teach them compassionately to those around you so they can be safe? Really, can you get a giggle about it? Like, I'm a human, this is what my anger is. Like, could you hand someone a one-page resume about your anger and be like, here's being in a relationship with me? Can you own everything? Your emotions, your actions, your life. That's her next section. Own your life. Live by your own goals, she says. So many of us have expectations that were put on us or expectations from society, and we make choices based on reactions, almost like a mouse going through one of those mazes, right? Like, no, turn left here. Actually, there's only one option, Or the flea circus? The flea circus is the idea that you could put fleas in a container and you could put a lid on the container and they'll jump around. They could get out, but they can't because there's a lid. But then you could take the lid off and guess what? The fleas do. Stay right in that jar. You can even take the sides off. Because they bounced against it so much, they heard, no, don't go there. No, don't do that. Not that way, little girl. Look like this, act like this, show up like this. No, little boy, it's supposed to be like that. So much that we're little fleas in a circus, and there are these walls around us, and we don't even realize, and there may be things outside of those walls that fit us, that serve us, that are for the highest good, or are part of our spiritual path or practice. But we don't engage them because we have learned to have a boundary that was never meant to be there. So can you take responsibility for your own life and live your own goals? Do you even know what they are? I know I have people all the time that kind of urge me to. In fact, on my birthday, a couple of girlfriends are like, what do you want to do next? And I'm like, I want to know what you guys want to do next. And they're like, really, what do you want to do? And they're trying to psychology whip me. And I was like, no, really, I really want to know what everyone else wants to do next because I don't want to think about what I want to do next. And then it's a long process for me because there's this and there's that. And I really don't know which one. And then I'll be disappointed because whichever one I pick is probably not going to be the one that's fun. And so I'd rather want to know what you guys want to do because at least then we'll all have fun. And finally, they're like, fine, drop it. We're going here. But can you figure out what you want? Some of us don't even know what we want sometimes. We're so used to appeasing other people, or we're so used to serving that when we're asked what we want, it feels awkward, or we don't even know. Have you ever had that? It's like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I should do this or do that, get this or get that. I don't know what I want. I remember a wake-up call for me with Carolyn Mace. Any of you know the work of Carolyn Mace? Yes. I'll tell you after the service what I put in to, I couldn't remember her name right away. And anyway, there's some cute stuff about Carolyn Mace. It's funny. Not really funny. Shouldn't have said that. Anyway, she has a TED Talk called Choices That Can Change Your Life. And if you don't know Carolyn Mace, she's an author, a healer, a medical intuitive. She's a coach. She's done a lot for the world of people waking themselves up. She doesn't have a gentle edge, really, but she is a wake-up person. And there was one time that I was listening to her, and it struck me so strongly. And she said something to the effect of, if you outsource your life and what you want to do, you know, if you give other people, other things, even your country, right? If you give that choice-making ability to anyone but yourself, you will have a rude awakening one day. And you will wake up and realize that you outsourced the most important thing in your life, which was your ability with your source to intuit and determine the direction of your life. And you will be angry. And I was like, well, I don't want to be angry, so I better listen to myself and listen to God, like listen to the highest among us and follow that religiously. So if there's anyone here thinking, I don't do that, I do follow my own goals. Do your meditations and then start listening because it's all over. If you're an American, you are doing some things that were not your idea, right? I mean, literally just travel the world and see different ways of doing things. Like, I would have all my water from my faucet go into like a gray tank and then use that to water the grass. And I wondered to myself, why don't I do that? I don't do that because I'm an American. We don't do that. It's not easy. They're not products. There's a million products if I want to poke my face and look like I'm 20 again. There's 100 million things I can do easily to do that. But I've got to like become an engineer if I wanted to figure out how to really make my home like it could be in my ideal world. Am I investing in that? No. Am I living by my own goals and living in my own integrity? No, not in that department, right? So there's so many things that we do. Okay, Carolyn Mace said this. She said, I am an observer. Those of us, and I would also call her a mystic, I am an observer. Those of us who are in the healing arts, we are observers of the patterns that mystify us in what makes, why do I become ill? Why do we break down? What helps us to become better? I mean, and this is from a talk, that's why it sounds a little funny. I mean, we are great mysteries to each other. And I find it so interesting that for all of the years that we continue to study us, that we are such mysteries, which should tell us right off the bat that we continue to open places within ourselves, that we ourselves, as we are the observers, that we are continuing to learn how to observe. And that we as human beings are continuing to find places to observe. Let us say that the world behind our eye is our new frontier. I'll read that again. Let us say that the world behind our eye is our new frontier. And that we have become intrigued with ourselves in a way that other generations have not. That this is the new frontier. We are the frontier. Hear that? We are the frontier. When we make that decision, when we recognize that what is behind the lens is the frontier, then we're going into the spiritual practice, that the kingdom of God is within, the realm of God is within, that the access point is within us. And we are giving ourselves a new freedom, a freedom to draw to us what fits, to really see what we are willing to accept in this life rather than to be asleep to some of the toxicity and some of the unconscious patterns that we've been tolerating. It all comes back to love or suffering. Carolyn says, you make a decision. I will not pass my suffering on, but my wisdom. I make the decision not to pass on my suffering, so that from the years of your life, you make that decision, the gifts that you will pass on. You pass on the wisdom you've learned, or you pass on this stage of suffering. What do you want to pass on? Charles Fillmore said, right here and now, the great work of character building is to be done. And whoever neglects present opportunities, looking forward to a future heaven for better conditions, is pulling right away from the kingdom of heaven within themselves. Namaste.